and thank you so much for joining me for Daily Spark with Dr. Angela. I am your host, Dr. Angela Buckchester. You guys know what I like to do on my show. Say it with me. I want to enlighten, inspire, and empower you to become your best self. Now, Scripture reminds us that the tongue is a small thing that makes grand speeches, but a tiny spark can set a great forest on fire. And that's what we want to do today, get you fired up about my guest. I'll be spending time with David Spielberg today, and we'll be talking about his book, On Deception Watch. So go on, get comfy, get cozy, get your coffee or get your tea, because we are about to get started. Hello, David. Thank you so much for joining me here on Daily Spark with Dr. Angela.
Good morning, Dr. Angela. It's a real pleasure and an honor to spend the morning with you.
Absolutely. So glad that you are here. Now, as is tradition around here, we always give our guests an opportunity to introduce themselves to perhaps those few folks out there that may be unfamiliar with you or your work. So first question, tell us a little bit about yourself. What makes you, you?
Thank you. First, I have a doctorate in physics. I've worked in the petrochemical industry for about 10 years, helping develop catalysts for automobiles, and taught environmental science for almost 20 years. In addition, I was a commentator for National Public Radio for several years, and a columnist for the New Haven Register also for several years. So I really enjoy words and communicating with people.
Absolutely. Now, being an author, is that something that you have always wanted to do, or did you find that this was perhaps the best way to share your message?
You know, Dr. Angela, it's probably both. As a teenager, I used to write essays to myself to clarify issues that I was confused about, and found that the process of writing helped in that clarification. And I just started keeping a journal. I've got probably thousands of pages of journal entries over the years, written hundreds of technical reports for business when I was in business. And then in my later years, got involved with writing for newspapers as a columnist and with the National Public Radio commentaries. So I've always loved writing, and this is just an extension of that.
I can definitely understand that. Now, when it comes to the title of your book, On Deception Watch, now that is a curious title. I must admit, if I saw that book on the shelf, I would pick it up and thumb through it just to see what that was all about. Now, when it comes to your title, did you find that the title came to you first? Did it develop out of your writings? What's the story there?
It absolutely came after the writing. I didn't spend any time at all worrying about the title. But once I finished the book, the title just came to me naturally. Watch is has some baggage with it associated with the military, not on my watch kind of thing. And there's a lot of deception going on in this story. It's quite a complicated and complex drama. Involving politics and science and the world economy and so forth.
Now, I'd like to ask the next question this way, and I ask it the same way of every guest who's on, and that is about the ideal reader. Would you say that this book is appropriate for someone as young as high school, so age around 14 to 18, or do you think that college age and older would be a little more appropriate?
It's a kind of a thriller, so I think anyone who likes thrillers would be attracted to it. There is some science in it. I've tried to keep that very, very simple without going into a whole lot of detail, because I want this to be a book that engages rather than glosses the eyes over and puts people to sleep. So it's, I think, appropriate for a teenage audience that's interested in what's going on in the world and maybe some slight insight into the science of what's happening.
Now, for many of the authors that I've had the opportunity to spend some time with, they've mentioned that there has been a nudge, if you will, or someone or something that motivated them to determine to make this book come to fruition. Like there was someone said, this is a great story. You should really write a book. Or, they woke up one day and said, I think that God really wants me to do this particular thing. However it worked out for them. Did you have a particular nudge or a particular motivation to make sure that this book was published?
Yes. Great question. I'm a little bit older than the average author, so I've been around quite a while, and was in love with the original Star Trek series, and watched all the reruns, of course, when it was canceled. But the idea of the Federation that they always mention in that book intrigued me, and I was wondering, how would such a federation really come to be? And so that was my spark. I decided to have that as a writing challenge for myself, to create a plausible story of where this federation idea would take hold and actually become real. So that was the initial nudge.
And there are quite a few listeners that are going, oh yeah, I loved that show. Oh my goodness. I think that we know more fans of the show than maybe some people would admit, but I think it really got our imaginations going, and you're right. It made you say, I wonder. So it definitely was a good program. I think it still comes on some channel somewhere. You can always pick up watch an episode, and I think that's a good thing. Now, for some folks, they have to decide what they are going to include in the book. You may have a really big, huge idea, but when it comes to the writing, you realize, oh wow, this may need to be more than just one book. Perhaps this needs to be 2 or 3. What am I going to include in book number 1? How did you determine what bits and pieces, as far as the storyline goes, how did you determine what bits and pieces you would include in this story?
That's also a great question. It's actually, when I finished the book, I realized I wasn't done, and that this has since become the first novel in a trilogy of novels about global warming, where this first novel, the overarching theme is sustainable energy. And if I can, I'd like to tell a short story about how the idea that I used to get this story going. In 1974, I was working as a physicist at an oil company, and was asked to visit a small research outfit in New Jersey called KMS Fusion, to see if they would be interested, if the company I was working for would be interested in investing in them. And actually, it's an amazing story. This company had succeeded in creating laser-induced fusion in 1974, and was absolutely sabotaged by the federal government and by jealous national and labs from all around the world that they beat to the punch. And the company had a tragic turn of events when their chairman was being interviewed by a Joint Committee of Congress about the harassment of the federal government for the research, and he died at the podium of a stroke. And that was the end of their company. The federal government then looted everything that they could find of value with this company, and shortly after, by 1980, it was essentially out of business. So I used that as leverage. So what would happen if this company hadn't gone under? What if they had successfully commercialized this way of producing basically unlimited energy at very low cost? How would that change the world? So that was my, the World Federation is a big picture, you need to have a big reason to create it. That was what I used.
Now, as far as how to properly read the book, many times an author will help the reader along the way, and they set the book up in a particular fashion. Some choose to kind of do a free style of reading, simply read the book from cover to cover, however you choose to do that. Others will suggest that we should read chapter 1 or section 1 before moving on to chapter 2 or section 2. Others present it more like a devotional, if you will, where you should read a few pages, put it down, let that digest, and then move on. Did you have a particular way in which you have helped the reader along on the journey, or is it kind of reader's choice? They can read however they choose.
Well, I'm hoping that the characters in the story are strong enough that the reader will want to just keep going and not sort of dance around in the book. It's basically character driven. There are very strong personalities throughout the story that I think will keep the reader engaged. The technical parts of it are, in some sense, the driving forces, of course, because it's about this transition to a hydrogen energy economy. But I think that the reader would do best by just starting at the beginning, keep going till you get to the end, and then enjoy.
Now, I'm going to ask you to tell us a little bit about the book, but I always like to put my disclaimer here. We are not going to divulge all of the ins and outs and ups and downs and little nooks and crannies of the book. You guys know what I'm going to say. If you want to know how it ends, buy a copy of the book. Now, with that being said, Dr. David, let me ask you this question. Can you tell us a little bit, and you kind of started, but I want to give you an opportunity to tell us a little bit more about the storyline of the book. What will the reader take away from having read your book?
I think there's a difficult philosophical question that the book raises, which is, do the ends justify the means? The development in my book of the successful use of fusion energy creates an opportunity for the world, and the President of the United States thinks it's too big to keep within the U.S. control, wants to give it to the United Nations for free distribution to the world. The chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff sees a different story. He sees it as leverage to try to create a truly new world order where he can use membership in access to this technology. Countries would have to pass a kind of a litmus test of good governance. And in most of the cases in the world where you have corruption and war and the ever-suffering poor and so forth, it's almost always due to poor governance. So his mission was to achieve that new world in addition to the salutary effect of fusion energy instead of fossil fuels. So I think the overarching theme is this deception in order to create a more benevolent world when we're all done. Is it all worth it? Because there's a lot of drama, there's a lot of mayhem, a lot of killing. It's a difficult story.
It definitely sounds like a great thriller kind of suspense. I love books that would make amazing movies because the book is giving you so much detail and your imagination just totally and completely takes those words and sends you on this thrill ride, right? And you're going, oh my goodness, I could just see the action and the tense music and all of that going on. So I love that your book provides that. For anyone who is an avid reader, then you're going to get all of those juicy bits, and I love it. I love it. Well, Dr. David, can you tell everyone, it is time for us to go to break, can you tell everyone the title of your book, where can we get a copy, and of course, how do we stay in contact with you?
Yes. Once again, it's On Deception Watch, and it's available, of course, at Amazon.com and wherever books are sold, actually. And if you want to stay in touch with me, I have a blog. It's called ondeceptionwatch.blogspot.com. No spaces anywhere.
Alrighty, everyone. Now you know where you can get a copy of the book. We'll be back right after this. And we are back. Thank you so much for joining me for Daily Spark with Dr. Angela. You guys know who I am. My guest today is Dr. David Spielberg, and we're talking about his book, On Deception Watch. So, Dr. David, let me ask you this next question about doing the research for the book. Do you think that because you do have your doctorate in physics, that you were able to do your research from a certain perspective, that there was a certain amount of detail that you were looking for that you were able to add to the book?
Yes, Dr. Angela. As I said, I wanted this to be a plausible story of how the Federation came into being, and so I did all the science in the book is real or imminent. The politics, the succession clause in the Constitution, the drama of Congress trying to figure out what to do when the president goes missing, and so forth, is all research that I did in order to make everything as plausible as possible.
Mm-hmm. And I thank you for taking the time to do that. I think that our aspiring authors need to know that many times when we're writing about a particular topic, that doing that extra layer of research is very vital and very important to make sure that the book is authentic. Now, one of the things that you had to do is you had to choose a country that would be in partnership, that would collaborate, that would help create the various highs and lows, plot twists, and all of that was included in your story. How did you go about making those decisions, and ultimately, what countries did you find fit the narrative that you were trying to walk us through?
Yeah. The story requires that the moon, I don't want to give too much of a spoiler alert here, but that the moon is essential to the successful commercialization of this whole laser fusion process. And sometimes truth is stranger than fiction, and this is actually true, that there are isotopes on the moon that are not found anywhere on Earth that are essential for this. And it seemed to me at the time that Russia was on the decline, or Soviet Union was on the decline, that China was ascendant, and in the future I decided that it would be China that the United States would have to partner with to keep the moon off limits to retain control of this technology.
I can see some people nodding their heads, saying, "Yeah, that would make sense." They're a superpower in their own right, doing their own thing. So yeah, okay. There are some countries that we have to admit have a little clout, if you will, and they're able to do some things the same way that we're able to do very big things. So I see why that would make sense. Now, for a lot of stories that are shared on the show, there's a lot going on between the lines, or there's an undercurrent, if you will, of some other little bits and pieces. Would you say that is true for your story as well, or is it just all drama and all suspense, or are there some other, like I said, little bits and pieces going on there?
There are definitely other things going on. There's some little bit of Ayn Randish philosophical discussions about politics. And this also, I mentioned it earlier, this do the ends justify the means? And that actually troubled me while I was writing the book, because frankly, I didn't have a good answer for that. So I'm not sure that an author has to provide the answer to every question, but the question itself is worth people considering.
Absolutely, and I want to agree with you on that. I think that for some storylines, just posing the question is amazing. It's like, oh my goodness, I never thought of it like that, or wow, the possibilities thereof. And it doesn't have to be answered in book one. Perhaps that's an answer for book three even. So absolutely, absolutely there. Now, if we are, and again, I don't want you to give it all away, and thank you so much for giving us just enough of a nibble to let us know what's going on there. Would you say that with the all that is going on, do we get any bits of a love story? Are there any love interests that develop with the all that's going on in the story?
Yeah, absolutely. I don't know, my writing style is I let myself get inspired. And these characters were basically, I don't outline a story to begin with, it just happens. And the characters of Sylvia Carlyle and James become lovers, essentially. And it's really sort of an incidental, kind of nice side story in this book, but becomes crucial in the next one, where they get married, and their son becomes a very crucial element in that story and in the final volume. So, yeah, love is not the primary story here, but it is a setup for what's going to happen in the next volume.
Now, in general conversation, just among the citizens of Earth, we have heard things that people say comments like, the moon may be our saving grace. We know that many space explorers, are trying to see if even Mars may be something that is plausible in a future. With that being said, do you feel that your book gives a sense of hope that there, if not here, perhaps there, that type of sense of hope for our future?
No, I don't think so, Dr. Angela. I think the hope is to try to make our current home as safe and benevolent for as many people and creatures as possible. So my sense of hope from this story is that we can get things under control and make our existing home, wonderful and beautiful again. The moon is there basically as a resource in my story. It's not there as a place for us to go and to escape the damage we've done to Earth.
That is good to know. I think that there are more people who want to get it right here. They want to help heal Earth and make sure that we can stay on this beautiful planet of ours. So that is good news to hear for your book as well. Now, I want to kind of shift gears just a little bit, and I try to ask successful authors questions for our aspiring author. And there's one question in particular that I ask of everyone, or at least I try to ask of everyone, and that is the publishing bit of it. Every author has to decide how they're going to publish their book. So with that being said, did you choose to go the route of self-publishing? Did you use professional services? Or did you initially want to, or even try to, pitch your book to what I refer to as the big boys? How did you make your decision?
Well, I did try to go through an agent first, and had actually Robert Ludlum's agent show some real interest in the story. He read it, his partner read it, they read it several times, made corrections over a period of about a year and a half, and then they finally elected not to represent me. And that was a huge disappointment, and I decided that at my age I didn't have time to chase agents down anymore, so I went to a vanity press to get it published.
And I think everyone has to make that decision on their own. But in sharing the everyone's ups and downs, I think that people can see a possibility for their own journey. So for anyone that has happened to, you are not alone. There is always another option out there, and I love that. I love that. Now, when it comes to all of the hard work that you have put in, when you're still in the process, many times writers are need a particular environment or atmosphere in order to really hear themselves think when they're trying to write. Did the time of day or location for you help you be more productive? Was it first thing in the morning, at the end of the day? Did you go off to the cabin and just spend like a weekend and crank it out? What worked best for you?
It was crazy, but there's a community pool that I went to, and I set myself up on a table there with my laptop, and I wrote the entire book under the overhang of the community pool on my laptop. The biggest thing for me is not to be disturbed, and people learned that I was working, and so they didn't bother me, and that worked out very well. It wasn't a particular time of day. It seemed like everybody's got their writing place. That was my writing place, and it seemed to be successful for me.
Absolutely. I must admit there, Dr. David, that is the first time I've gotten the answer of the poll. I love it. I love it. Because to me, that gives someone out there who's thinking of a place that perhaps is different than some of the other answers that they've heard, and they're going, well, is this a weird place? Absolutely not. It doesn't matter where it is as long as it works for you. So thank you for that answer. But I could see how that would work out. People are busy doing the pool thing. They're not going to bother you. You have just enough kind of background noise, kind of the people become the white noise so that you're able to concentrate. I could see how that worked. Absolutely. I love it. I love it. I love stuff that's different. See, this is why I ask these questions. Now, when you were done, the book has been written, edited, you have chosen what you want your cover to look like, you have your publisher, everything is completed, and you are now holding book number one, copy number one in your hands. How did you feel in that moment?
Oh, it was a huge, huge sense of accomplishment. It took me a couple of years, actually, to write the book. And when it was finally done, I felt like I'd given birth. It was just a wonderful, wonderful feeling of achievement.
Absolutely, absolutely. And I have not spoken to one author that said that it was a kind of feeling. Everyone's like, oh my goodness, I was so happy to finally have it. So I am glad about that. Well, thank you so much for coming on and spending some time with us here today. But before I let you go, can you remind us one last time, what is the title of your book? Where can we get a copy? And of course, how do we stay in contact with you?
Okay, excellent. It's On Deception Watch, and it's available at Amazon or wherever other books are sold. And my blog site is ondeceptionwatch.blogspot.com.
Thank you again, Dr. David, for being a guest on the show today.
It's a pleasure, and thank you very much, Angela, for having me.
Absolutely. And listeners, thank you for spending some time with us here today as well. You could have been anywhere, but you chose to spend it here with me, and I thank you for doing so. As always, may the Lord continue to shine His face upon you. May you receive His grace and His mercy in all that you do. Until next time, everyone, remember that you are blessed in the Lord. Have a great day, everyone. Bye-bye.